There's a stretch of road outside of the city I live in where time slows down. I don't go there very often as I live and work in the city, but when I was underemployed and living mostly off of my savings and help from my family, I rode my bike down there a lot. It wasn't just a lack of noise. Something about that road felt as if it were actively dampening sound, like hanging carpets on your walls so that your neighbors can't eavesdrop on you. One time I got back from my bike ride and found that my phone had fallen 30 minutes behind my laptop. I restarted the phone. That solved the problem, but left me puzzled. I've heard of watches needing adjustments, but iPhones. I decided to go there one morning. It was a cloudy morning. Usually it was the middle of the day when I went there, but I wanted to see if there was anything different about it at this time of day. I even bought a cheap analog wristwatch because I wanted to see if it lost any time when I was there. It took about 20 minutes to arrive. I was out of breath, probably because I biked way faster than normal. Traffic was always light on this road. The weather was unusually warm. I left my bike on the side of the road and walked out into the open field. Something was wrong. The air was very dry and I felt tired. The urge to just lie down and sleep was pressing down on me, as if I'd been sedated. I kept walking through the tall grass, clapping just to make sure that sound was indeed softer. My feet were feeling heavy and I could barely hear my own footsteps. If I didn't get back to my bike soon, I might just collapse from sheer fatigue. I had turned to go back to the road when my right foot got stuck in something. Looking down, I saw that it had gotten wedged between the roots of a tree, but there were no trees within 30 feet of me. This was not a heavily forested area. I brushed through the grass with my hands, trying to find any other roots. Maybe I could grab one to use as leverage and pull myself free. No luck. I pushed myself upright and saw that there were trees in front of me, so many that I couldn't see the road anymore. "What the hell?" I said. I could hear myself now. The sounds dampening, whatever it was gone. I didn't feel tired anymore, but I did not recognize my surroundings. I was now in a heavily forested area. The tree whose roots I had gotten stuck in was the biggest of them all. There was something funny about the big tree. I twisted myself around so that I could get a good look at it. Its leaves had an asymmetrical shape, and its bark had stripes on it. Its branches swayed even though there was no breeze. I ducked as a branch swung near me. Another came from the other side, and I ducked again. Was the tree trying to hit me? A branch hit me in the back of the head.
"Listen,"
said a voice. I didn't hear it with my ears. Something was trying to communicate by going straight into my head. I listened for a second, but I didn't hear it anymore. Maybe it had to be touching my skin to communicate. So I bent my knees and placed my hand on the root.
"Glad you figured it out,"
said the voice in my head.
"I was worried I would have to hit you again."
"What's going on?" I said out loud. I tried thinking about it, but the tree didn't seem to hear me. Telepathic communication works only one way, I suppose.
"You're in danger,"
said the tree.
"If you don't get out of here, you will turn into one of us."
"Is that what you are?" I asked. "Did you used to be human?"
"Look around,"
said the tree. I did. There were trees everywhere. The canopy of branches overhead were so dense that most of the sunlight did not penetrate it, but I could not see or hear any animals. My voice and movements were the only sounds I heard.
"Some of them are just trees,"
said the tree.
"They're the ones you have to watch out for. Most of us, well, we're just like you. Went walking somewhere we shouldn't have, and fell through a hole."
"I didn't fall through a hole," I said. "I was in a field. There was grass."
"Did you feel tired?"
asked the tree.
"So tired you wanted to lie down?" and you couldn't hear any sound. Like there was cotton in your ears.
How did you know that? I asked.
Holes aren't always in the ground.
Said the tree.
Sometimes they're in reality, like someone is holding up a big sheet. Picture a tear in the sheet. You just stepped through it.
But why was I feeling tired? I asked. And the sound?
That's the other reality leaking through.
Said the tree.
The air from this dimension isn't supposed to be in your dimension, so it makes you feel tired, and time goes slower.
I knew I wasn't crazy, I said.
I feel like you've known that for a long time.
Said the tree. So, what happens now? I asked. I'm just stuck here until I become like you? I moved my legs a little. They didn't feel stiff. I examined my skin. It did not look like bark. The roots holding my foot loosened. I stepped free and faced the tree. Since I was no longer touching it, I couldn't hear what it was saying. One of the branches lowered in front of me. I reached out and grabbed it.
I'll help you get out of here,
Said the tree.
There's a place at the edge of the forest where you can go back to your reality. You can't go back the way you came. It's like a hole. You fell through. You can't just climb back out. So you have to go back to your side another way. Just keep going until you get to the cliff.
The cliff? I said. What do I do when I get to the cliff?
Take a leap of faith,
Said the tree. I'm an atheist, I said.
Then you better find something to believe in.
Said the tree. How do I know if I'm turning into you? I asked.
It starts on your back.
Said the tree.
You'll feel itchy. The itching will spread. Eventually, it will get so bad you'll start to claw your own skin off. Then your vision will go. You'll think your hearing is getting better because you can sense the vibrations and tell where everything is through the feeling of your feet on the ground.
Like Toph, I said.
Who?
Never mind. Continue,
It doesn't matter.
said the tree.
By that point, it's already too late. Here's what you do.
Another branch pointed. Now that I knew the tree used to be a human, its leaves looked almost like human hands to me. There were things about the other trees that were irregular as well. The branches would be so numerous that it would look more like an oversized bush, or the roots would extend unusually far from the trunk, and in formations that looked almost geometrical.
Go that way.
Said the tree. It looked where its branch was pointing.
You'll know you're going the right way, because every tree has a knot on its trunk pointing that way. Except for the trees that are actually trees. Watch out for them,
How will I spot them? I asked.
because they look like normal trees.
Said the tree. But what will they do to me if they see me?
Nothing,
Said the tree.
but they'll tell him that you're trying to escape, and he won't like that. Don't ask me his name. It hurts to say it.
How far is it? I asked. Somewhere in the distance, a bough broke. The tree's branches recoiled. I lost my grip on its branch. It reached out to me again, and I grabbed it.
Go now.
It said.
Hurry.
What was your name? I asked. The tree had to think for a minute.
David.
It said, and yanked its branch out of my grasp. Another branch hit me on the butt like it was my baseball coach. I took the hit and went running through the trees. My back was starting to itch. It was faint, but that was all the motivation I needed. I ran through the trees as fast as I could without tripping. Every so often I would stop to check their trunks. David was right. They all had knots on their trunks pointing the same way like a compass. I wondered where all these people had come from. If hundreds of people had gone missing, that must have attracted someone's attention, unless they all went missing from different places. Even so, there must be someone back in my world who knew about this place. I could see the cliff through the trees, only about 40 more feet to go. I was almost there, when a branch clotheslined me. The fall knocked the wind out of me, and I think my chest was bleeding from the impact. Nevertheless, I tried to get up. The itching on my back was getting worse. An enormous bough laid itself over my chest and pushed me into the ground. "What are you doing?" I shouted, trying to get the branch off of me. "I'm trying to get home."
David didn't tell you about me, did he?
Said the tree. This one had the widest trunk I'd ever seen. Its roots must have gone very deep in the ground, possibly through the side of the cliff face.
I work for him.
Said the very old tree.
I make sure people like you don't escape.
"Why would you do that?" I asked. The itching on my back was getting far worse. If I weren't panicked and lying on my back, I would be scratching it furiously right now.
Because,
Said the tree.
I want to see what's inside you. When you become like us, you split open. It's like watching someone do surgery. It's the most intimate thing you can imagine.
I was struggling, but it was no use. This bough was too big and heavy for me to budge it. One of the other trees near me had the blackest bark I had ever seen. I started to rock back and forth. The ground under me was shaking.
Stay out of this,
Said the tree that was holding me. A few seconds later, it said,
You want to find out what's worse than being a tree forever?
Jocelyn must have said something in return, because the evil tree did not say anything for a moment. Its grip on me was loosening. If Jocelyn rocked back and forth any harder, I would be able to get free. I tried to sit up, just so I could see the cliff. What if David was telling the truth, and the only way to get back to my world was to throw myself off of it? I looked at Jocelyn. She was rocking so hard you'd think she was trying to tear herself out of the ground. The evil tree was just now shouting obscenities. It sounded almost human. I would get free in a few seconds, judging by how fast the itching was spreading. I doubted I had much longer than that. "Guys," I shouted at the trees. "Can any of you hear me? I don't want to be a tree. If you can help me,"
They're not going to help you.
said the evil tree. Even Jocelyn stopped rocking back and forth. For an instant, there was silence. The itching was spreading all over my body. David was right. I was starting to feel the earth below me in a way that I hadn't before, like I knew where the moisture in the ground was and where the other trees were. I closed my eyes and focused on what was underground. It was as if I could feel around down there with my mind. Since my body was about to grow roots, my consciousness was already extending below the earth. I closed my eyes and willed myself to fall into it. "Can you hear me?" said a woman's voice. I couldn't feel the air around me anymore. It was as if I were physically underground already. "Are you Jocelyn?" I asked, except I didn't say it, so much as think it. "Yes," she said. "Sabus doesn't know we can do this. He spends all his time on the surface. If you sink underground right now, you can stop yourself becoming one of us until you go above ground again." "How do I do that?" I asked. "Relax," she said. "You're already getting there. Just let it happen." I took a deep breath. It was the first time I had been aware of my body in a minute or two. The itching was getting better already. My head went first. I felt like something was pulling me by the top of my head, except it didn't hurt. Who knows what anyone standing on the surface would have seen. I thought back on the time I accidentally dropped acid in college. It didn't feel exactly like this, but it didn't feel entirely unlike it either. I just felt so connected to everything, like I could talk to another galaxy or talk to squirrels, but more importantly, I could tell that there was an opening below me. I emerged into a tunnel and fell to the floor. Fortunately, I landed on my back rather than my head, so I just had the wind knocked out of me. I opened my eyes. It was pitch black.
Hello?
I said with my mouth rather than my mind.
Jocelyn? David?
There was no answer. The itching was gone. I was no longer turning into a tree, but that meant I would have to be touching the trees in order to talk to them again. Maybe I could do that later, but first I had to figure out where I was. I pulled my phone out of my pocket. There was no signal in this dimension and the screen was cracked, but at least the flashlight still worked. I turned it on and looked around. My body and clothes were the same as they always were, except covered in dirt. I wondered if gophers existed in this dimension. If the trees weren't really trees, did the forest animals exist as well? The tunnel I was in wasn't tall enough to stand upright. I wondered who had dug it in the first place. There must have been more to this dimension than just trees. I looked to my right. The way was blocked by a giant pile of severed limbs, except that they were not made of flesh. The limbs were made of wood, like someone had carved a bunch of mannequins and then torn them apart at their joints. I leaned closer. The wooden limbs had much more detail than any carving I had ever seen, right down to the toenails and the creases in the skin. Some of the limbs looked like they had come from women, some from men, some from old people, and some from young. But there were no torsos or head anywhere. I wasn't sure I wanted to know why that was. The way to my left was clear. I started down it, having gone only 10 feet, when the roof overhead split and a giant root reached down into the tunnel in front of me like a tentacle. The root whipped around and struck at the walls. It must have belonged to Sabus, the evil tree. He knew I was down here, and he must have known Jocelyn had helped me. I guess she realized she couldn't free me by rocking back and forth, so she helped me find my way down here. But Sabus couldn't sense me. Jocelyn had said something about how he spends his time above ground. If he didn't know where I was, did that mean that she did? The root withdrew back up into the earth. A few seconds later it emerged again, this time right in front of me. I shrank back, narrowly avoiding its touch. When it withdrew, I moved forward as quickly as I could, crawling through the now partially collapsed tunnel in front of me. The root emerged again behind me, searching for me in exactly the space where I had been just a few seconds ago. The way it thrashed around, I could tell he was angry. There was something else about it that unnerved me. When Sabus held me down, I noticed that his bark was smooth and cold. It glistened in the light. Sabus didn't look or feel like a tree so much as a ceramic model of one. The more I thought about it, all of the trees up above didn't really look like trees. Actually, there were a few that looked like trees. They must have been the ones that David warned me were spies for someone. I kept moving, and eventually stopped hearing Sabus look for me. My back was starting to hurt from crouching, and so were my knees. I was starting to wonder if being a tree was worse than this when I emerged into a cavern. The far wall was rock, but the roof was still dirt. What filled the cavern, however, were dozens of wooden torsos with heads but no limbs. Each had their mouths open, and the looks on their faces were all ones of inexpressible pain. Someone had turned them into wood in the middle of torturing them. What a way to die. "Stop," whispered a voice as I walked towards the far wall. The voice was barely more than a whisper. An instant later, dozens more voices joined in, all of them warning me not to go any closer to the far wall. I stopped in the middle of the room and looked around.
What's going on?
I said.
Who are you guys?
We are the failures, said a child's voice. He wanted to turn us into them, but something went wrong. We couldn't change all the way. So he put us down here and takes off our arms and legs so we can't escape.
Who is he?
I asked.
Don't say it hurts to say his name. Tell me something.
He is the forever tree, said another voice, an old woman's. She started to say something else, but then a younger woman's voice cut in. He lured us here, she said. He told us he could help us live forever. He did not tell us what it would be like. The trees up on the surface, all of them everywhere in this place. He tricked us. Now I just wish I could go back home. How long have you been here? I asked. I don't know, said the young woman. I don't remember the year. Did the war end? What war? I said. Iraq? Afghanistan? She was silent for a moment. Hitler, she said. That was his name. He was very bad. Did they stop him? I was silent for a moment. Guys, I said, I'm sorry for what happened to you. If there's some way I can help you, I'll do it. But I have to get out of here. I'm still not, I'm still human. We can help you back to the surface, said a man. I think he was the one who first told me to stop. But you have to go straight up. Don't touch the wall. It will suck you in and turn you to stone. That hurts even more than turning into wood. Well, I'm definitely not touching that wall, I said. You've convinced me of that. But how do I get up? Reach, said the old woman's voice. I looked up. Not with your arms, with your mind, like you did when you came down here. How do you know about that? We can see things, she said. Sense things. Not like the ones who went all the way did. But you're not the first to come here. What about the ones before me? I asked. Did they escape? Silence again. Just reach, said the old woman. I closed my eyes and stood as straight as I could, trying to extend my mind into the soil above. It didn't take long before I could feel it start to happen. If coming down here was like falling asleep, going up was like waking up. I breathed deep and felt my face touch the soil. Dirt had never felt so good before. Something burst through the dirt above me and wrapped itself around me so hard that I thought my bones would break.
Found you,
said Sabus. How? I croaked. There was no doubt about it this time. This route was far too smooth and hard to be made out of wood. Sabus was not a tree.
I can go to many places,
he said.
It's one of the perks of working for him.
I couldn't think of anything to say. Jocelyn was nowhere to be found, and I couldn't possibly struggle out of his grasp this time. I thought the root that held me would pull me up through the dirt, but I realized with a sinking feeling that he was moving towards the stone wall. The whispering voices below me all spoke up and begged him not to punish me like this, but he ignored them. I couldn't even take a deep breath to calm myself because he was squeezing me too tightly. Something struck my foot. Something else struck my hand. Open your eyes, said a whispery voice. I did, and realized that I could see in the cavern even though Sabus had shattered my phone. The limbless torsos were all launching themselves at Sabus's roots, biting into him or just knocking themselves against him. He laughed, except that I could see pieces chipping off of him. He really was made of ceramic.
Stop,
said Sabus, as one torso sunk its teeth into his root and bit off a large chunk.
After a few seconds, his grip on me loosened. I fell to the floor, still able to see in the dark somehow. "Go back," said a voice. "Get our limbs." I ran back the way I had come. The torsos couldn't move much, but they could move enough to make it difficult for Sabus to get me. Maybe if I could reattach their limbs and help them fight against Sabus and the Forever Tree, maybe I could find Jocelyn again. All I knew was that I had to get as far away from that stone wall as possible. I scrambled through the tunnel, able to see everything for some reason, although it was in black and white. My phone was destroyed. The sounds of the fight raged beneath me. Wood splintered and ceramic chipped. Occasionally, I would hear a sort of whispery groan as Sabus smashed one of the torsos into little pieces. I moved through the tunnel as fast as I could, half crawling, half running in a crouch. At a few points, I had to crawl like a commando due to Sabus having made the roof cave in. After a minute or two, I reached the limbs. They were coming alive as well. "Stop," said Jocelyn's voice. She was in my head. I wasn't touching her. "Why?" I said out loud. "They need help." "They will destroy each other," she said. "It's for the best. Come back to the surface." "Won't I turn into a tree?" I asked. "It's slowed down," she said. "You have the sight." "Why?" "Come up here," she said. "We will talk." The severed limbs were crawling past me on their own accord. They paid me no mind. I couldn't hear the struggle going on anymore. Maybe Sabus or the wooden torsos had won already, but Jocelyn would probably know already if that were the case. I reached out again with my mind, this time focusing my energy upward. After a few deep breaths, I felt myself moving through the soil. It felt a little like waking up. I emerged back on the surface and opened my eyes. Everything was still in black and white. The itching on my back was there, but very faint. Sabus was sinking below the ground. The ground around his trunk looked disturbed, and he was rocking back and forth slightly as more and more of his trunk disappeared into the earth. The wooden torsos were taking him down, even as he smashed them into pieces. I pictured the remaining ones all holding onto his roots with their teeth and pulling him down with their weight. In my dimension, it would take unimaginable force to suck a tree into the ground. But things didn't work the same way over here. I could move in a way that was not possible where I was from. And, of course, I could talk to trees. "How do you feel?" asked Jocelyn. She was looking at me. I don't know how, but she was looking at me. "Fine," I said. "What happens? Why can I see like this?" "It's what happens when you're underground," she said. "You feel what we can feel. You can see like we can see." "Is this how you see? In black and white?" "Well, no," she said. "But how we see is not something your brain can process. This is as close as you can get." "All very interesting," I said. "But I think it's time I went home." The cliff David had told me to leap from was less than 100 feet away. There were no trees standing between me and it. "Wait," said Jocelyn. "There is something else you have to do first." "What is it?" I said. "The Forever Tree tells people it can make them live forever," she said. "It's been alive for longer than anything in your dimension. If you even looked at it, you would go insane. It doesn't look like a tree. It looks like how a tree looks to an ant." "So, what?" I said. "You want me to kill it?" Jocelyn laughed. I swear I heard a chuckle from the trees around us as well. "You can't kill it," she said. "I don't even know if it can die." A sudden gust of wind blew past me in the direction of the cliff. Even the leaves on the wind looked different from the leaves one would see on real trees. This whole place was so unsettling. Everything about it looked real and not real at the same time. "Wind," said Jocelyn. "That means it knows about you. The forever tree. One of the real trees must have tipped it off. You have to go, now." "I was going to jump off the cliff, but you stopped me," I said. "Is there another way out?" "No. You still have to jump," she said. "But you have to take one of us with you. If one of us gets out, the others might be able to break free. I almost got free of the ground when I was helping you. It was like I could walk again. There's something about you finding your way here by accident. It upsets things. Usually people come here because they want to live forever. Now some of us can do things we couldn't before." "Those ones underground," I said. "The failures. Could they move before I came here?" "No," she said. As if on cue, Sabus sank even lower underground. His branches were almost touching the ground now. The loose soil around him was piling up so much that it was obscuring my view of him. "Who am I taking back?" I asked. Jocelyn shook something loose from her branch. A branch from another tree landed at my feet. I recognized the bark and leaves immediately. "David," I said. "He helped you," she said. "He deserves a second chance." The other trees rustled their branches in what I interpreted as a great murmur of agreement. "So what if I bring this branch back? Will it turn into a person? What then?" "That's not how it works," said Jocelyn. "If you take a piece of David, it will open a small hole, back to his own time and place. Maybe he can squeeze through it. We'll try. Maybe we can get him back to when he came from, hundreds of years ago." "What if that upsets the timeline?" I said. "Like in the movies, somebody goes back in time and changes something, then they get back to the present and the Nazis won World War II or something." "If David goes back to his own time, he will live a good life and die fulfilled," said Jocelyn. "That's it." "Are you sure?" My calves cramped up. It was the most intense Charlie horse I had ever experienced. I fell to my knees, but my feet felt far too heavy. Taking deep breaths to steel myself against the pain, I started massaging my calves. As I did so, my hand slipped a little lower on my leg and touched stone. I froze. The pain was still there, but now I had a bigger concern. I looked back at my feet. They were stone. The cramps were not going away, and I could not move my feet. With some effort, I managed to push myself up to a standing position. "The stone has found you," said Jocelyn. "But I didn't touch it," I said. "The stone, I didn't—" "The rules are different now," she said. "It's like I said with you coming here by accident. It must work differently for them, too. Not just us." Sabus branches were sinking below the ground now. I walked towards the cliff as fast as I could while unable to move or feel my feet and holding David's branch. But I couldn't go very far, and the pain was spreading. The muscles in my legs started to spasm. Walking was almost impossible, and I still had 50 feet to go. "Reach," said Jocelyn. "With your mind. Try it." It was my best bet. I knelt and placed a hand on the ground. Closing my eyes, I tried to picture myself at the edge of the cliff. In my condition, I wouldn't be jumping so much as throwing myself off, but that would have to do. I felt the air whipping by on either side of me. My hand felt as if it were digging. I opened my eyes. The cliff was now a few feet away. Something brushed my leg. I heard Sabus' voice. "Hear him," he said. How we could reach this far, I don't know. But my mind was immediately filled with the sounds of hundreds of voices screaming. Except every scream eventually ended with a sharp exhalation, like someone was forcing the air from their lungs. That must be what happens when they turn into trees. They can't breathe anymore because they don't have lungs. I dragged myself towards the cliff. The ground was over 100 feet below and was covered in grass. No trees in sight. My legs were mostly stone right now. Sweat poured from me, and I was moaning with every movement. I reached out and grabbed the edge of the cliff with one hand, holding David with the other. Adrenaline is a powerful thing, because I somehow managed to pull my half-stone body off of it and into the free fall with only one hand. I don't think I fell in a straight line. At least, I never brushed the cliff face on the way down, which is fortunate, considering that I had no lateral movement when I fell. Taking a leap of faith, as David had encouraged, was by that point a no-brainer, as the alternative was worse than death. The scary part was that I couldn't feel the parts of me that had already turned to stone, only the parts that were about to. That meant that soon I would be numb all over. If I hit the ground and died, at least it would all be over quickly. I didn't die, of course, but I did hit the ground. The grass gave way as I sunk into it. It didn't feel all that different from jumping into a ball pit like I did at Chuck E. Cheese's when I was little. For a second, I couldn't see anything. Then, I was lying in the field where I had initially gone to investigate the time disturbance. My legs were flesh again. To somebody passing by, I probably looked like I was just looking for familiar shapes in clouds. It was a sunny day. I checked my analog watch. Since my phone was in pieces, I had to guess that it was telling me the correct time. A branch lay on the ground next to me. It looked like a normal branch. I got on my bike and rode home. Maybe I should have taken the branch with me, but I couldn't carry it with me while biking. At home, I took a long shower and then went out to buy another phone. The whole experience felt like it had happened in another lifetime. None of my friends had been with me. Maybe they would believe me if I told them. Seriously, I need to stop going through phones so quickly. My biggest regrets about the experience is that I didn't learn more about David. Not his full name, not which time and place he had come from. That one failure was from World War II. Did the trees experience time in the same way I did? Maybe it moved slower over there. Who knows how long David had been waiting for someone to stumble through. There is one thing I'm trying to do differently now. The next time I investigate something out of the ordinary, I will bring a friend with me. Good friends can make any experience bearable. I wonder if the trees ever felt that way.